and I tried an heirloom butter bean. It was called a Houdillon de la Granja. And this is for some reason the only part people remember, but I was hungover and all I had in the house was a jar of heirloom butter beans. And so I couldn't be bothered to go shopping, and I just tried one straight from the jar, and that was game changing.
I am so excited to be talking to you, Amelia Christie-Miller. Thank you for joining to chat beans. I know it's a topic that we both enjoy a lot. But to get us started, I wanted to say I'm a huge fan. So we connected, I guess, a few years ago now about beans, as you may imagine. But it's been so fantastic watching you and your company grow, watching you write a cookbook, right? A lot of good things happening. My sister lives in London. She lives in the UK, and she told me that she constantly always has your beans in her cupboard as well. So I sent them as a gift one time to her, and now she can't stop eating them. So, on that note, I'd love to also ask you if you could please introduce yourself and share a bit about your background.
Oh, thank you, Chelsea. It's always a joy to speak to you about beans, our love in life. Um, I'm Amelia. Yeah, I'm the founder of Bold Bean Co., and we are a premium jarred bean and pulse brand based in the UK. But we're also just a brand on a mission to make you obsessed with beans. So, a big part of what we do is trying to break down the barriers for bean usage. So, we send out loads of bean recipes. That's a big part of who we are, just to inspire people and to show people that they are delicious and versatile and you should all be eating them.
I love that you are speaking my bean love language. So, absolutely spot on. And on that note, do you want to share just a bit about how you landed in bean world? How did that come about?
Absolutely. So I think that anyone who loves food and cares about sustainability, cares about food sustainability and food systems, I don't know how they don't also arrive at beans. I think it is just like if you start caring about these things and do enough research, all roads lead to beans. So that was kind of my experience. I was working for a food sustainability startup, and there I was working with kind of top London chefs and farmers, growers, producers. And on one hand, I had these hugely inspiring chefs who, in the move towards a more plant-based or veg-forward, menu, they were not going for fake interpretations of meat. They were just celebrating beautiful beans and pulses. And as someone who used to be a private chef who loves cooking, I too found that it really connected with me. I wanted to reduce my meat, but I wanted to just celebrate beautiful vegetables and pulses that still made me feel satisfied rather than kind of adopting something which I kind of mimicked meat that just didn't personally appeal to me. So I had that on one side, beans were the answer when it came to cooking, plant-based, all of that. And then on the other side, I was working with farmers and producers who were more and more talking about soil health, soil erosion. They were talking about biodiversity, food security. And once again, the answer lay in beans, because as you know, beans are nitrate fixing, they naturally fertilize the soil. And all of these things just kind of came together for me. And that is very much a food sustainability kind of angle. But I think key to this was also how beans made me feel and how delicious they were in my cooking. I loved cooking. I loved how they made me feel. And since launching Bold Bean, I, have become more and more interested in the health side of things. But that's not why I started it. It was purely out of thinking that they were completely delicious and the answer to all our food system issues. So I was sitting there thinking, okay, how can I make people love beans? What is the answer? And I'm very inspired by brands and how they can shift consumer behavior. I think that brands have a real role to play in making things cool and things like that. So I knew I wanted to do a brand, and then I was like, what should I do? Should I do beans in a kind of sauce that was just really easy for people to consume and buy and all of that, and start including them more in their diet? And then kind of just stripped it back and thought back to the time where I had my bean perception changed, which was when I was living in Spain, who have a thriving and really good bean culture. And I tried an heirloom butter bean. It was called a Houdillon de la Granja. And this is for some reason the only part people remember, but I was hungover and all I had in the house was a jar of heirloom butter beans. And so I couldn't be bothered to go shopping. And I just tried one straight from the jar. And that was game changing. I just couldn't get over how delicious a bean could be when it was sourced well, grown well, and crucially cooked well. And I was like, that's what I need to bring to the UK because that experience for me was game changing. So I think it will be for everyone else.
Well, you're right. That sticks with people. I remember the hungover aspect of that story too. But more importantly, the quote that you said, "All roads lead to beans," I want it on a t-shirt and on my wall. So we should look into
Let's
that.
do that.
But it's a great bean story. Like you said, it's there's so much, right? They are delicious. That's a huge part of it. They have to taste good. Plus there's the sustainability, there's the health benefits. It's the perfect food. So, as you go about supplying the perfect food and helping people realize how amazing beans are, what beans does your company currently offer? Are do you have some products coming down the line? Should we keep our eyes open? But yeah, what do you currently have?
Yeah, so currently our best sellers are queen chickpea, which is a kind of a really large variety of chickpea. This year it's come from Mexico. A queen butter bean, which is it's a piękniast. It means handsome Johnny in Polish. That's like a kind of a big variety. It's of Phacelia cocineros. I always pronounce that wrong, but you probably know. But I don't know if other people do know. But it's essentially a scarlet runner bean is kind of the family. Um, then we've got a queen red bean. We've got a queen black bean. We've got some organic skews. We've got our first British bean, which is a Carlin pea, which is a pulse. It's a pea grown in Cambridgeshire and Lancashire and across the UK, but it's really delicious. It's nutty and interesting. It's amazing. And we are launching our first Italian Belotti bean this summer, which is that's an exclusive, Chelsea. Don't let it. People who've got through this much through the podcast, they deserve to hear it. But other people, they're going to have to wait. They can't just get the highlight. Um, and yeah, and that's kind of our focus for the time being. What we really want to do is show people how to use these kind of mainstream beans well, and then as we grow, I'd love to see a future where we can hear lots of different varieties from across the globe, really, just celebrating the diversity of the bean, which is another reason why we love them.
Yes, lots and lots of delicious products and healthy products too, right? Win-win there. And so your team really does a wonderful job of bringing beans to life. You work with an incredible group of folks, and I'm curious, were they all bean lovers, or have they started really experiencing an expanded love for beans as they work with Bold Bean? Like how has this gone?
It's really interesting. Like I would say, so Ed is, he's my co-founder. I tried to actually bring him on the journey really early on, and he was like, not sure about this bean thing. He was just like, oh, no thanks. And then it took time, and now he's like obviously completely hooked. But it took time, and I think that is representative of the bulk of perceptions in the UK. And it was really useful having, what really hooked Ed was the health benefits and how it made him feel. And that was a turning point for him. And that was really valuable having someone come in to love beans from a different angle to me. And then I would say that since then, like Hannah is, she's an amazing chef herself and a foodie. So she loved beans before because she had tried our beans, and we were kind of connected when as soon as I kind of launched the product range, and she got into them then. And Rosa, it was just fate. So Rosa is our amazing product manager who is based in Spain, and we met up for coffee, and we needed someone to help us with developing new products, with working with our manufacturers, with helping us source the best beans ever. And Rosa's dad grows beans. He grows these beautiful Valencian beans called Garrafon, which are a really lovely specialty bean that's kind of native to the Valencia region, and they have it in big paellas and things like that. And I was like, this couldn't be more perfect. You've got the skill set, and your dad grows beans, and she's always loved. She wants to build create products that are really good for people and planet. And typically, her previous work, she was making, a fizzy drink, which just didn't align to her values. So I think, that made sense. And then since then, everyone who's joined, I think, has been very, you know, they've kind of tried the product and been interested in food. But for example, our recent hire, Andy, so I called him and I said, look, we need you. So he's come on as head of grocery, which is a really important position. It's helping us work with the big retailers. Um, and I told him about the job. I was like, oh, I'd love you to apply for this job. I think your skill set's perfect. And he was like, no thanks. I'm not interested. And then that weekend, he went home and he bought some beans. He does like beans, but he wasn't that fussed. And then his wife, who hates beans, tried our beans and said, oh, maybe I do. And then he called me back the next week and he was like, actually, I do want to consider this job because you managed to convert my wife. And I was like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. So I think that it's been a different journey for everyone, but now I can firmly say they are all bean fanatics. It doesn't take them very long. It takes them, a few weeks, few inspiring talks from the likes of yourself, because I think it is just infectious when you hear more and more about the positive attributes of beans, not to fall in love with them.
Exactly. The more you learn about beans, the more you eat delicious beans, how can you not truly fall in love, right?
Exactly.
Definitely. So, speaking of good ways to fall in love with beans, your cookbook is amazing. I try to not look at it when I'm hungry or late at night because then it makes me hungry, right? The photos are beautiful, the recipes are fantastic. But what has the overall response been to your cookbook?
Yeah, it's been incredible. I think, excuse the pun, it really has. I think that what has happened is often people don't really get it because they're so used to seeing beans in the same context that they've grown up with, a baked bean or a three bean salad or a chili con carne. And don't get me wrong, those are all great things. But how are beans supposed to be new and cool? But I think bringing it to life through a cookbook has really helped do exactly that, make people hungry to eat more beans. And we don't want them to be eating beans because they're good, because they're healthy, and all those reasons. We want them to eat beans because they're delicious and they want to. And I think that's the crucial distinction. Like, you're not going to make big impact. You should, we should all meditate every morning, do yoga, and we should go to the gym, and we should have celery juice and blueberries, and but it's not that realistic. But actually, if you make something tempting, then that's how you change people. And I think that's what the book has been able to do, is show people what we're talking about. We're not saying have beans as a sad healthy day meal. We're saying have them and look forward to them. Have them on a Friday night because you're excited to do this recipe. And I think having dishes like cacio e pepe butter beans and smoky black bean bake with kind of coriander crema and pickled red onions, like, these dishes are what really bring to life how amazing beans can 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 be.
Yeah, exactly. I recently tried the recipe for miso beans, which was amazing.
I
So
love
if
that
you
one.
were, right. So if you were to recommend to somebody with who has no dietary restrictions, if they were going to try one recipe, if they were going to jump in and do a first bean recipe out of this cookbook, I'm sure it's hard to choose, but what might be one of your top recommendations to someone?
Miso beans is definitely one of them. But I think that unless you've cooked with miso before, that might be quite overwhelming. But I think that miso beans is a concept. The idea is you cook butter, miso, any onion you have, tumble in, a can of beans, in our case, a jar, and then top it with, kimchi or a fried egg, some chili oil, and it's just amazing. But I would also say I always think butter bean puttanesca is a really good one because puttanesca sauce is a classic Italian sauce where you cook down anchovies, red onions, capers, olives, tomatoes, and it really introduces people to the idea that beans are a neutral, delicious palette and base that you can add your favorite sauces to. And I think that really unlocks people's ability to see beans in their day-to-day life. Have beans with your favorite pasta sauce. Try that out, or half the amount of pasta you have, add some beans, and have it half bean, half pasta, because they have that amazing versatility. They just work so well in that context. And I think butterbean puttanesca is one of my favorite ways of expressing that.
Well, having this conversation has definitely reaffirmed me the point that I shouldn't look at this or hear about this when I'm hungry. So thank you for that. And on your social media as well, not just in your cookbook, you share just absolutely fantastic looking recipes. And I'm wondering what some of your maybe your most successful social media posts have been. And they don't have to be recipes. You do also really fun videos. I remember one where it was acting as if an American was coming to visit the UK, and the first thing they did was like run to find your beans. And I will reenact that absolutely when I visit, because that is what I'm planning on doing when I get there. But yeah, what have been some of your really successful social media posts that have just resonated with people?
I think, recipe wise, one of the most successful concepts is a binotto, where you basically cook onions, garlic down as you would a normal risotto. But then before you add the rice, you deglaze the pan with a glass of white wine, cook that down a bit further. Then you add the beans because they're already, cooked if you've got, or, you know, add cooked beans at that point, and then that is a beautiful binotto base for you to add to any kind of any kind of style of risotto you fancy, but using beans. That has worked really well. And I'd say that, and also people kind of generally love the idea that we are like normal people doing this. I think we're so used to seeing kind of, well, faceless corporations, don't connect with people. So people like people. So they also love the, videos where we as a team are kind of dancing outside a supermarket that we just got listed in, or, singing along to something or doing a funny video. They love all of that as well.
Yeah, I do too. Again, I truly love following you because you're fun, right? It's delicious recipe ideas, but it's also just a dose of fun and being able to connect with you and your team. So I think that's really well said. And yeah, Bonato or Binotto, fantastic, really great idea. And it brings the different, different taste, different texture you get to really explore in the kitchen through beans. So I would argue that's the best culinary exploration, although I may be a bit biased. So
Love it.
perhaps biased. Well, you never know. And then you already shared kind of one story of how people have reacted to your beans, or more than one, right? You were able to convert somebody's spouse to beans. But have there been any other great stories that come to mind of a really unexpected or fun reaction that folks have had to your beans? I know you've had a lot, but maybe if you want to share one or two.
Yeah, I mean, we have them like the whole time. I would say Andy's wife kind of being converted, and then that meaning we managed to recruit him. That was brilliant. And like, thank you to her for changing her mind. I think, this week we are going on really excitingly on national television, on a show called Dragon's Den, which in the US is known as Shark Tank. And I have no idea how they're going to cut the scene, but I do know that in the den when I was there, they tried one of our beans, and that was quite an experience. It was hard, and I think I won't give anything away because I don't even know what will be recorded. But hopefully, by the time this come out, we'll have more clarity on that, and that will be an interesting segment of how and whether we managed to convince the dragons.
No matter how they cut it, huge congratulations. That's big, but how can they not fall in love with your beans?
Well,
Yeah.
it was tough, I can tell you. There were some bean haters in the room.
Well, all right. Well, we'll bring them around.
Yeah,
They'll come to their
yeah,
senses, surely.
exactly. Exactly.
And since we're talking about beans, I opened this up for folks to ask some questions. So they submitted them beforehand. And one of the questions they had was if they're looking for a creamy bean, what would be your top or one of your top recommendations for the creamiest bean?
I would definitely say the Fasolius cocinero. So that's in the States, the Royal Coronas, I think. The Greeks call them gigantes, the Spanish call them judions. We call them handsome Johnnies. I think that is the creamiest and the creme de la creme of the bean world.
They are delicious. Yeah, folks can find either a large lima or a butterbean if you're in the US. They go under both names. Royal Corona is another one, right? So, is there anything else you would like to share that you don't feel like we've touched on yet? And there's no obligation. You've shared so much with us already, including a sneak peek into a product that's coming out. But anything else that comes to mind?
I'm trying to think. I think the one thing that's really exciting for bean loving community is really the emphasis around, where the health movement is moving, because a lot of consumers and people are driven by health. And this is something which, this is where protein has really dominated for the last 15 years. And I think the next movement is really around gut health and fiber. And I think that is where beans rule. And so I think that the more and more we can emphasize the health benefits, the more and more people we can recruit into the bean fan club.
Well, I am on fiber train. So, yes, I agree with that. They're one of the best natural sources of fiber. And so, in addition to having that protein, they have so much more to offer. That again, the more you learn about beans, the more you fall in love with them. So, for your personal favorite bean dish, and again, it's hard to pick a favorite, but at least lately, what has been one of your favorite go-to bean dishes? Maybe it's just directly out of a jar.
I mean, that is a great dish. No, I'm going to talk about the dish which I think has played a big role in my journey, which, first of all, so one of the first dishes I made was really simple, because I think simplicity is really key at just cooking, onions, garlic, white wine, queen butter beans, in cook them and then add like a dollop of creme fraiche, and have that with some roasted cherry tomatoes or some salsa verde. And actually, it's a dish in the cookbook, but I also served a kind of variation of it at my wedding. So it's a kind of very special dish to me. I love that combination.
Serving beans at your wedding sounds absolutely perfect. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a super complicated dish, right? It can be relatively simple and just be so packed with flavor and nutrition. So, a similar question, but not necessarily the same answer. If somebody wants to start adding more beans to their diet and they're looking for just an easy way to do that, and it might be the same answer, but what's a good, easy, good to get going with beans, doesn't take too long to prepare? Is there any other recipe you might recommend for that, or would it be the same answer?
I actually think what I mentioned earlier about adding half pasta, half beans, just doing that, because I think when you start eating beans, your digestive system's kind of like, wow, you're giving me all this amazing fiber. What am I doing with it? And so it can be a lot for people if their body's not used to it, because your body's just getting so excited they're finally getting all these amazing nutrients. So I would say start slower. Don't OD on the bean initially, because you'll find that quite hard. You need to kind of slowly but ease yourself in. And I'd say the half pasta is a really good shout. But also, if you're a meat eater, I think that in some really like dishes like lasagna, and in the UK we have like shepherd's pie or chili con carne, like halve the amount of beef you have in those dishes and have red beans, and slow it in that way, because I think that's a really good way of getting your body ready to start indulging in the full bean meals, which is kind of what we emphasize on our Instagram.
Give your body time to get used to the excitement of the nutrients. I love that. That's fantastic. So, Amelia, if people want to find out more about you, about Bold Bean, where can they find more information?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I post a lot on LinkedIn. You can follow our journey on there, just kind of a bit more of behind the scenes, under Amelia Christie-Miller. And then on Instagram, go to the Bold Bean Co page. The whole team, posting amazing recipes, but we also invite guest chefs to showcase their favorite bean recipes, which is a really fun way of seeing all the different kind of food writers in the UK celebrating beans.
It's just brilliant to talk to you. You have so much bean enthusiasm, which of course I love. I will keep following along. I'm going to keep cooking recipes out of your cookbook. And thank you so much for your time today and for sharing the bean enthusiasm.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chelsea.